Hi, and welcome back to Military Law Talks, where a former military attorney uh, breaks down the federal and military law in easy to understand layman's terms. And so today we're going to talk about DOGE. What is it? Where's the legal authority for this new government agency? And we're going to give an update on the unfreezing of the funds lawsuit that is continuing to progress. So we got a new ruling out today. So if you haven't seen my video from yesterday where I break down the latest rulings in that case, so this is a case of New York and several other states suing the Trump administration over cancellation of certain funds and the ensuing case, the opinions that have come out in that case. And so I will link that video below, but it's important to get some background. You'll probably want to watch that video as well in addition to this video. And I've also linked the court documents for that case. So with everything, don't take my word for it. Go read the source documents. So there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter about the judge in this case. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the judge as well. But let's just look at the latest filing, and then we'll talk about the judge, and then we'll talk about DOGE. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so this is a new opinion that just came out today. So it was just released today. So we see 2/12/25. That's today. Remember, we're back in the District Court of Rhode Island. It's Judge McConnell. And again, the plaintiffs, New York leading the charge, but with several other states joining in against Trump administration. All right. So this new order talks about the other three orders that they were issued in this case. We broke that down yesterday in the video yesterday. So if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to watch it. And this order is based on the defendants. So that's the Trump administration's motion for a stay. So a stay is wanting the court at the district court level to stop what they're doing in light of their appeal at the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Remember, yesterday we went over an opinion from the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And in that opinion, essentially the First Circuit said, hey, you're kind of here too early. Go back, figure it out at the district court level, and then you can come back. So this is the district court level, remember. So the district court is making a decision on this motion to stay pending the appeal to the First Circuit. So, again, same standard as that motion for the TRO, deciding on the TRO, the four different prongs. And I'm not going to read this opinion at length. I'm just going to go over, and I will link this opinion as well down in the comments, but I'm just going to talk about some highlighted portions. So this was something that was discussed. I saw a little clip on Fox News discussing this portion of the opinion today. So it says, as the court has since reaffirmed the TRO, that temporary restraining order permits the defendants, the Trump administration, to limit access to funds based on actual authority from applicable statutes, regulations, and terms. So essentially, if there's fraud, if there's a statute that limits the disbursement of funds, the Trump administration can do that in accordance with, statutes, regulations, and terms. Thus, I'm quoting again from the court, thus the court has not stripped agencies of any statutory authority to limit access to federal funds, nor has the court impunged the defendant's ability to use discretion in limiting funding based on their actual authority from applicable statutes, regulations, and terms. Essentially, they're saying, hey, you can still follow the law if Congress gave you the authority to not disperse funds or to limit funding, you can still do so. So it says the defendant's arguments to the contrary are unfounded. Again, talking about that OMB directive that was rescinded. The defendants argue that essentially this case is moot. It's over. Why are we here? Some more highlighted portions that I wanted to point out. So, as explained above, the TRO, that temporary restraining order, does not prevent the defendants, the Trump administration, from limiting the disbursement of funds under their respective statutory authorities. Rather, the TRO was aimed at restraining any categorical federal funding pauses under the OMB directive and the president's 2025 executive order until this court could issue its order on the plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction. So remember, the court, in the opinions from yesterday, was real concerned about categorical stoppage of funding, freezing broad categories of funding. So the court in this decision, this district court judge, is saying that if there's some other statutory or regulatory requirement that the executive branch, in order to follow that, would need to pause funding or stop funding, they can still go ahead and do that. And so, for example, if there's fraud, if they found that there's fraud, they wouldn't have to disperse those funds. They could still stop dispersing those funds. And so thus the TRO simply, again, I'm quoting from the opinion, that the TRO simply ordered the parties to maintain the status quo until this matter can be heard on the merits. Now, the court explains in a footnote that the court has a scheduled in-person hearing on the preliminary injunction motion on February 21st. So that's next Friday, not this Friday, next Friday. It's actually my 40th birthday. So that'll be interesting. So again, it's in federal court. Federal courts do not allow video recording. So it will not be live streamed. Now, potentially there could be audio. If there is, I will try to get the audio and live stream it and discuss it. All right. Let me see if there are any other portions that I highlighted. Okay. Yeah. So again, I'm quoting from the case. Issuing the stay in the TRO would allow the defendants to engage in a very unconstitutional, illegal conduct that the TRO aimed to temporarily restrain and promote the interests of public and avoid any irreparable harm to the plaintiffs. So the judge in this case, Judge McConnell from Rhode Island, thinks that the Trump administration, what they're doing when they're impounding funds, when they are not dispersing funds that Congress authorized, believes that this is unconstitutional and illegal conduct. And so he's saying that if I issued a stay, if I stopped that TRO, then they could continue to engage in this illegal, unconstitutional conduct in the opinion of the judge. So he's going to keep that TRO in place to stop them from doing it. Again, I'm going to quote again from the case. Nothing suggests that the defendants will not resume operating under the OMB directive and the incorporated executive orders if the court stays the TRO. So he's saying, if I stop the TRO, I think that the Trump administration is going to violate the law. That's his opinion. So thus, the court finds that the risk of irreparable harm to the plaintiffs, states aren't going to get their money that Congress authorized if the blanket, categorical, and unauthorized impoundment of the funds resumes. So remember, we talked about the Impoundment Act passed under the Nixon administration. The Impoundment Control Act says that the president has to spend the money that Congress authorizes. And if the executive branch doesn't spend the money Congress authorizes, they got to go back to Congress and explain why. I'm going to quote again from the case. Paired with the public's interest in maintaining the status quo pending the full hearing weighs against issuing the stay on the court's orders pending appeal. So the court is saying the district court is not going to grant the stay pending appeal. It's going to keep the TRO in place. And so it denies that defendant's motion for a stay. So again, Judge McConnell. Now, McConnell is trending on X. I just checked about 30 minutes ago, but it could be because of Mitch McConnell. So, but there's some information on X about Judge McConnell that I'm going to share. So I'm going to take this one down and pull up the other one. So some interesting information came out about Judge McConnell. So it was in the Clinton administration. He was a Democratic donor. Surprise, surprise. So let's find the right tab. All right, here we go. All right. So we got Representative Andrew Clyde from Georgia's 9th Congressional District. Now he's quote tweeting. He says, I'm drafting articles of impeachment for the U.S. District Court Judge John McConnell Jr. He's a partisan activist weaponizing our justice system to stop President Trump's funding freeze on woke and wasteful government spending. We must end this abusive overreach. Stay tuned. So this is my opinion. I think some judges, maybe they deserve to be impeached if they commit crimes, high crimes and misdemeanors, right? That's what the Constitution says about impeachment. Now, I don't know that this judge has done anything of the sort. And I can tell you, I think Congress is kind of spinning their wheels when they're talking about impeachment. I think impeachment is highly unlikely of a judge because, so he's one representative out of, over 500 of them. They would have a full-blown hearing. This is how impeachment works. Full-blown hearing in the House of Representatives. And then if convicted, if the articles of impeachment are voted on and accepted, it's going to go to a trial in the Senate. And to convict in the Senate, you need 2/3 majority. Now, I don't think ever in a day we're going to get that right now with the current makeup of the Senate. So I think they're just spinning their wheels. If Congress really wants to make a difference and really wants to empower the Trump administration and DOGE to be able to freeze funds, what this congressperson should be doing is rallying other congresspeople to repeal the Impound Control Act. That's how they would need to do it. So if they would repeal the Impound and Control Act, that would allow the Trump administration and future administrations to not have to spend all the money that Congress appropriates. And you know what? Congress funding runs out in almost a month. And there's been a lot of talk right now about passing another continuing resolution. That's not going to help things. So if Congress really wants to make a difference, they need to pass an actual budget and they need to cut a lot of this wasteful and fraudulent spending in the budget, and that would actually help. So I think all this grandstanding about impeaching district court judges is just not a winning issue. But I'm going to share some information about the judge. Take it or leave it. So this is from Natalie Winters at Natalie G. Winters at X. So she has some videos from the judge. He's talking about being a white middle class privileged male, and he needs to understand that when he's sentencing criminals who are women, Black, transgendered, taking that perspective. Now, I will emphasize that all judges have biases. Every single person, every individual has a bias and decides things based on emotions. Now, lots of judges and lawyers like to think that they don't let emotions play. They just follow the law. But in reality, they always let emotions rule. So this is an interview. You can check it out on X. So I don't really agree with this statement. Now, these clips are taken out of context. I haven't seen the full interview. So, maybe these statements are accurate about comparing Trump to a tyrant, but based on these clips alone, I just didn't see it. Um, Judges talking about letting their personal opinions influence their decisions. And like I said, I mean, I just think that this is just true. Like everyone has a bias. And unfortunately, we just know from science that people make emotional decisions and then they come back and try to rationalize them. So I don't know that this judge is any different. And I'll use myself as an example. I am a libertarian. I have been called myself a libertarian since I was a teenager. I'm a Ron Paul libertarian. I'd love to cut the government down to back to just what the Constitution requires. And if I were a judge, people on the left would call me biased, if I was making a decision on this case, if I decided the opposite way. So I think there's room on both sides to call out judges' bias, and you can check this out. You can check out and maybe find the full interview, check it out yourself, and make a decision based on yourself. But I just think that there's right now a whole lot of talk on X about these cases without a lot of analysis. I don't see a whole lot of people actually reading the opinions. So I encourage you, don't take my word for it. Go read the opinions yourself. I'm going to post them down below. Go read the opinions yourself. So found a little something else about this judge. So during his confirmation hearing, he wanted to answer he was required to answer some follow-up questions from a few senators. And so I'm going to bring that up now, and I will post that below as well. So let's check this out. So let's see. All right, so I'm just going to pull up some highlighted questions. So let's see. Responses. John J. McConnell Jr., that's the judge in the unfreezing of the funds case. So what's the question? What's the most important attribute of a judge, and do you possess it? Response. The most important attribute is intellect. The judge's ability to understand the law, both statutory and case law, and apply it to the facts is the most important attribute of a judge. Yes, I believe I possess the necessary intellect to be a good judge. Now, prior to this, Judge McConnell being a judge, looks like he was a civil litigator. He did several high-profile cases. So it's not like wasn't a lawyer. I mean, he'd been a lawyer for a long time. He'd been a civil litigator. Judicial temperament. My view on judicial temperament: the judge should be fair to all parties, listen closely, be open-minded, be polite, respectful, courteous, and decisive. I consider fairness to all parties as the most important of these qualities. I believe I meet these standards. So, compare this to his interview and, make a decision for yourself whether you think that's true. He said, if confirmed, I would apply the precedents of the Supreme Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, regardless of whether I believe a higher court had seriously erred in rendering a decision. Now, I'm going to tell you, every nominee is going to say that. These are, I'll give a little inside baseball. They're actual law firms, and that is their job, is to prepare government officials and nominees for congressional hearings. And that's all they do, is they sit down with the nominee, they role play questions, and they prep them on how to answer questions. So, whether you think these responses line up with his interview, that's up to you to decide. He talks about, you got a question about, he published an interview where he said, I'm an emotional person about injustice at any level, personal, societal, global. The question, do you consider yourself an emotional person when it comes to injustice? He says, as a lawyer, I represent some clients who had sympathetic stories with whom I made an emotional connection. I think all lawyers can probably agree with that statement. However, emotions play no role in my position as a district court judge if I'm confirmed. How will you go about checking your emotions if you become a judge? Response, if I confirmed, I am committed to deciding cases based on the legal precedent with all the facts presented by the parties. Emotions will not play a role in this process if I become a district court judge. So again, we got his words, his interview, and you to decide. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so that's the update on the unfreezing of the funds case. There are some filings that are due tomorrow or on Friday, so we may get another little update on that Friday. But now we're going to get to DOGE. So what's DOGE? So what started as a meme coin, which I owned for a while, and then I sold it really at no profit. But now has become a department of the government. So let's look at some executive orders explaining what DOGE is. So DOGE, what does it stand for? Department of Government Efficiency. All right, so this is executive order signed January 20th, 2025. So Trump's first day in office, establishing and implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency. And if you don't know how to find executive orders, it's pretty easy. Go to whitehouse.gov and click on presidential actions, and you'll be able to find all the executive orders that Trump has signed. I believe it's up to 11 pages now, so it's a lot. So he's been signing some every single day. All right, so let's get into it. So it says, the president's establishing DOGE to modernize the federal technology and software to maximize government efficiency and productivity. And I can tell you, I worked for the federal government, Department of the Army, and yeah, we got some really, really old systems, extremely old systems. I can say I've looked in when I was a labor counselor, I was privy to the pay system for civilians, and it's older than me. It's from the 70s. I swear to you, it runs on like MS-DOS. So yeah, we absolutely need to upgrade our technology systems, our software systems. All right, so executive order gives some definitions. Here, important part, DOGE structure. All right, so they're reorganizing and renaming the United States Digital Service. So what happened is under the Obama administration, the Obama administration, by executive order, created the United States Digital Services. So the Trump administration just took that already existing agency and renamed it and gave it a new mission. So, and it even kept the same acronym. So United States Digital Service is now renamed the United States DOGE Service. Still USDS. And it's established in the executive office of the president. So they answer to the president. Actually, the head of USDS answers to the White House Chief of Staff. That's right here in this sentence. And so it's organized as a temporary organization. It says that DOGE is going to be in effect for 18 months, and it's actually going to terminate. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a government agency actually have a termination date. They generally just go on in perpetuity. But it's going to terminate on July 4th, 2026, America's 250th birthday. So I'm sure that was chosen for that reason alone. All right. And so what happens, what this executive order lays out is that, hey, we have this head USDS administrator answering to the chief of staff, answering to the president. And within that, each agency head will establish a respective agency DOGE team that's going to work with the head USDS. So that DOGE team is going to have at least 4 employees. They can be special government employees. These are employees that are temporary appointed for a specific job, and they can be hired or assigned within 30 days of this order. Agency heads shall select the DOGE team in consultation with the USDS administrator, and each team will typically have 1 team lead, 1 engineer, 1 human resource specialist, and 1 attorney. And then agency heads will ensure that the team leads coordinate and work with USDS, right? So they're all kind of answering that chain of command up to the president. And so their job, what's their job? What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to modernize federal technology. And this is what the USDS was supposed to do back in the Obama administration. And I'll be honest, I commissioned into the Army in the Obama administration, and I had never heard of USDS before. And trust me, I didn't really see much software modernization or improvement in my 10 plus years in the Army. So, but it sounds like DOGE is actually going to get the job done. All right, so they're supposed to modernize technology and software, improve the quality and efficiency of government-wide software, network infrastructure, information technology systems. And this is a huge issue that most agencies, their technology system is different than the other agencies, and they can't talk to each other. So we have that issue in national security apparatus and the intelligence agencies. Their systems don't talk to each other. They don't share information well. That was one of the outcomes of the 9/11 commission that they pointed out was, hey, all these different agents, there's like 17 different intelligence agencies in the government, and they're not talking to each other. They're not sharing information. So this was a huge intelligence failure because of this inability to share information. I could tell you from military side, the military branches, we use different software, we use different systems. We don't talk to each other. Even within the Army, sometimes you got people on different networks, can't email each other, can't use computer networks when you move to a different location, or you're in a temporary assignment at a different duty location and you can't plug into the network because you don't have, it's kind of a mess. And when it comes to healthcare, there's a big move in military healthcare to move to Genesis for electronic health records. And one of the big reasons was because Congress was kind of annoyed at, hey, the different service branches, you can't change your medical records from one service branch to another because the systems don't talk to each other. Some service branches, literally, you had paper records still, and you had to carry your paper records from one duty location to another to get your medical records. And also, the medical records weren't on the same system as the VA, so you couldn't take your medical records. It was a heavy lift to take your medical records once you get out of the military and go to the VA system. You had to I had them on a disc. I had to take them as a disc and then take them to the VA. That's what I had to do. And that's what a lot of service members had to do. And so now with the point of the Genesis system is to try to ensure that they're on the same system and it's easy to transfer records from military to VA. And is it really working out? I don't know. I get mixed information from the field on that. So we'll see. But that's part of it is, hey, get this government-wide software, network, infrastructure, IT system. Make sure that they talk to each other. Make sure that they have interoperability. So if they were able to do that, that would be great. Ensure data integrity, facilitate responsible data collection and synchronization. And so it's important to keep the data private, ensure it's secure. And so agency heads shall take all necessary steps to ensure USDS has full and prompt access to all unclassified agency records, software systems, IT systems, and adhere to rigorous data protection standards. Now, there are some lawsuits that are trying to stop the DOGE teams from accessing information, and so we'll go over those lawsuits as well on this channel. All right. So executive order is not going to displace anything else, it displaces all other executive orders and regulations. That would be a barrier to providing USDS access to agency records and systems, but nothing would construe or impair the authority relating to, the different heads of the agencies or applicable law and regulations. All right, so that's how DOGE was created. So again, we have USDS, we have this centralized DOGE that answers to the chief of staff. then up to the president. But then each agency is required to create, at a minimum, a 4-man team, a DOGE team within the agency to implement and streamline and improve government efficiencies within that agency. All right, so we got a new executive order that came out today that further talked about DOGE and made some other changes. So let's get into that one. All right, so this is implementing, I gotta find it on my screen. Implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, Workforce Optimization Initiative. So this was signed yesterday, February 11th. So they want to eliminate waste, bloat, insularity, and want to essentially reduce the size of the government to help out the American taxpayer by hopefully reducing taxes, right? Reducing waste, reducing the federal debt. So there's definitions. I'm not going to go through the definitions. You can read that. But I'm going to explain what this executive order does. So this executive order creates a hiring ratio. So remember, we had a hiring freeze. That was an executive order that was signed Trump's first day in office. So there was a hiring freeze on most governmental agencies. Now, some governmental agencies got a blanket exemption. So that was the DOD got a blanket exemption, Homeland Security, and the VA. And I believe there were some other more specific exemptions in some other agencies. I think the IRS is one of them as well. And so, but all the other government agencies, they're currently in a hiring freeze. So they had to, if they had outstanding hiring actions or offers on the table that didn't have a start date, they had to cancel all of those and they couldn't hire any more employees. And that hiring freeze is in place for 6 months. And so they're saying, notwithstanding that hiring freeze, OMB, so Office of Management and Budget, has to submit a plan to reduce the size of the government's workforce through efficiency improvements and attrition. So they want to reduce the size of the government. This plan shall require that each agency hire no more than 1 employee for every 4 employees that depart. That's like a 30% decrease. So it means 1 employee quits, then you got to get 3 more employees to quit before you can replace 1 employee. So 4 employees have to quit before you can replace 1. So that's pretty significant. Natural attrition in the federal government is about 6% a year. So that could really increase the attrition in the government because you can't hire to fill that natural attrition. All right. This order doesn't affect the hiring freeze as applied to the IRS. And I think there's that the hiring freeze that this is referring to was, remember, under the Obama administration, there was they were hiring 82,000 more IRS agents. That was paused. And so I think that that's what this is talking about. Further, this ratio does not apply to functions related to public safety, immigration enforcement, or law enforcement. So they don't have to follow this. So public safety, immigration enforcement, so ICE, think ICE, Border Patrol, law enforcement, they don't have to adhere to this ratio. All right. And then agency heads also need to adhere to the federal hiring plan that will be promulgated pursuant to Executive Order 14170 as of January 20th, 2025. That's reforming the federal hiring process and restoring merit to government service. This was the EO that essentially eliminated DEI, DEIA in the federal government, and that restored merit hiring actions. And so there should be a plan, right? So the head of the agency should be working with DOGE to ensure that we're hiring people in the highest need areas and that we make these career appointments inapplicable with law and that EO, and that we shouldn't fill vacancies just because they're empty. We should only be filling vacancies if the agency head determines that the position should be filled. And then each team lead, the DOGE team lead, has to provide a report, a monthly report from that agency. All right, now we're going to get into reductions in force. So if you don't know what a reduction in force is, it's a RIF. So there was lots of RIFs in the 90s under the Clinton administration. So a RIF is essentially, as it says here, large scale reduction in force. So that means you just cut 10%, 20%, whatever it is. And or you can eliminate entire series, entire types of jobs. And so a RIF is done to just reduce the size of an agency. You could get rid of an entire agency through a RIF itself. And an employee who is downsized in a RIF, you generally how to determine employees that are RIFed is a undertaken. There's a plan in place. Generally, veterans get more preferential treatment than non-veterans. There is if you're a more tenured employee, a more senior employee, you're going to get more preference over a junior employee, but it's downsizing. That's really what it is. It's downsizing. And if an employee is removed from the federal government through a RIF, they have no rights. They have no right to sue. They have no due process rights. That's it. Their job is eliminated. There's no suing at the Merit System Protection Board, the MSPB, to try to get their job back. Their job's gone. Like the entire authorization for that job is gone. So it's a really efficient way to reduce the size of agencies. And so it says that all offices, all agencies need to initiate large-scale RIFs. RIFs are coming. The federal employees are going to be RIFed. Some entire agencies will be RIFed. Department of Education. Trump has said today he wants to eliminate the Department of Education, wants it gone. So all their employees are going to get RIFed. All right. And so it talks about, hey, if you have offices that do that are not mandated by statute or law, they should be prioritized in this RIF. So let's get back to agencies, what the Constitution says, or what your core essential functions of your agency is. If you have all this extra stuff, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, that's what's getting rid of. We're going to close those offices and we are going to eliminate those positions. We're going to RIF those positions. Also, all components, employees performing functions not mandated by statute or other law are not typically designated as essential during a lapse of appropriation. So that means if we don't have a budget and there's a government shutdown, some employees are designated as essential employees and they continue doing their job even if they're not getting paid. They all get paid. Again, they all get back pay at some point when Congress passes a budget. But other employees who are deemed non-essential, they get furloughed. And so this executive order is telling agency heads, hey, go figure out which employees have a statutory or required job by law, and all the other ones could be RIFed. All these non-essential employees could be RIFed. And so, yeah, Holly in the chat says, the problem is everyone thinks their job is important. No one wants to raise their hand to be a part of the RIF. Well, the thing is, the fork in the road email was essentially self-selecting. If people wanted to self-select and get out, they can volunteer to essentially be part of the RIF. But RIFs are not bottom up. They are top down. So the agency head is going to decide what jobs they're going to eliminate. And so it's not volunteer. You don't volunteer to be a RIF. You'll just RIF. And then it says this subsection shall not apply to functions related to public safety, immigration, or law enforcement. So those agencies, Department of Homeland Security, immigration, border patrol, Department of State, likely won't experience much attrition or rifts, but all the other agencies, fair game. All right, says within 30 days, the director of OMP will initiate rulemaking to revise 5 CFR 731-208B. That talks about suitability criteria. So in order to get hired with the federal government, you have to meet suitability criteria. So you have to meet certain criteria. And they're adding to this criteria, which means that they're essentially going to make it a little harder to even qualify to make the bare secured, suitability qualifications to be qualified for government service. So, failure to comply with legal obligations, timely tax returns, failure to comply with anything like citizenship requirements. If they violate a non-disclosure obligation, that could make them unsuitable for government service. Theft or misuse of government resources or equipment, negligent loss of government material or resources could make them unqualified for government service. We got another question in the chat. So, one of the most frustrating government processes, every senior leader wants to make their mark. So, all these programs started by one senior leader are kept without review after those senior leaders leave. Absolutely. That's absolutely true, just like the government agencies. So, like I said earlier, this is the DOGE, the first government agency I've ever seen with a time limit. It's going to end in 18 months. So, yeah, we create all this bloat. We make the beret. Yeah, absolutely. We make all these changes and then they're just kept. Right. And it's a common refrain in government service. Well, that's just how we always did it. Right. We don't change. We don't try things new. That's just how we always did it. I always hated that answer. But looks like change is coming. This administration is absolutely dedicated to changing, to reducing the size of the government. And this is a plan that they're going to do that. So, 30 days to have a plan, a reorganization plan, and then within 120 days, so 8 months, they have to report back as how we implemented this order. So, and then maybe it should be extended, modified, terminated. So, some exclusions doesn't apply to military personnel. Now, I think based on the executive orders that have come out, based on the border mission trying to have operational control of the border, likely we may see active duty military end strength increase, not decrease under this administration. And the Secretary of Defense has signaled that as well, that we may see increases among active duty personnel. So it's not that the DOD isn't fair game for cutting. We definitely have fat in the DOD that can be cut, but it looks like end strength military personnel numbers may increase. May, I say. The Secretary of Defense recently did a town hall, and he did talk about getting back to being a warfighter, military, getting back to basics, getting back to mission readiness, and looking at the Marines and seeing how they're a pretty lean fighting force. They're very small comparatively to the other branches. And so that was, in my mind, maybe a signal. Maybe there will be some cuts to the DOD. All right. Some other exclusions: national security, homeland security, public safety. So this national security language in another executive order, that was the hiring freeze executive order, got the DOD a DOD-wide exemption. Now, I don't know, that didn't apply to like the return to work executive order. The DOD did not get a blanket exemption to that. So who knows if they'll get a blanket exemption to this or not. But it looks like probably Department of Homeland Security probably will get a blanket exemption from this EO. All right. And then just some general provisions. So again, that was issued yesterday. So big takeaway from this one is that DOGE is implementing workforce optimization initiative to reduce the size of the government. And the big way to do that is that they are going to have this. We already have this hiring freeze that applies to most government agencies, but we're also going to reduce the size of the workforce, that for every 4 employees that quit, only 1 can be hired in their place. So it's a big way to reduce the size of the government just by attrition alone. All right. All right. That is all I have for tonight. And thanks for joining me. And again, if you got value out of this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm a new channel. Please help spread the word. Hopefully, I have content that you enjoy. If you want me to cover anything else, leave it in the comments. Leave some comments. I try to be real responsive to the comments. You can follow my YouTube channel, subscribe. And I'm also on Rumble. Please subscribe there as well. Rumble is growing. Rumble had a big day today. They had the CEO of Rumble was in the White House briefing room today. So I think Rumble's going to grow as well. So follow me over there. And again, I will likely stream every evening as we have updates and continued EOs coming out every day. So have a great night and see you tomorrow.